So in this lesson, we're going to talk about the annual once every 2 or 3 years and once every 5 years thing. Because if you have been watching these lessons in order and the modules kind of in order, you'll know that I periodically will say, do this every year, do this every 2 or 3 years, do this every 5 years. So I thought it would be really helpful to actually give you the beginnings of a little bit of structure that says, these are the things we should do annual, these are the things every couple of years. So I'm going to do that, but I'm going to do that with a caution for you, and that is you should add your own stuff to this list. This is just my kind of generic templated list. So this is intended to guide you, but not to be the definitive thing that you have to do. If you have an executive director, for example, who's been with you for 10 years, you love her performance, she's doing an awesome job for you, you're going to probably do her performance appraisal every 2 years. So you move that one to the every 2-year list and you take it off the annual list. So a few things you want to do annually, normally: executive director 360-degree performance appraisal, new board member recruitment and nomination, the review and approval of operation and capital budgets. And if you don't have capital budgets, you might want to think about that. Lots of smaller and medium-sized not-for-profits are not doing capital budgets, and we really should be doing them. The fourth thing on our list is regular review of financial statements and specifying what that would be: monthly, quarterly, whatever it is in your policy. The audit of the organization, and then remember, we have tasks that relate to the board with the audit. Should be reviewing the auditor's report, reviewing the management letter, and having an in-camera session with your auditor to talk about both the report and the management letter. The next thing on our list to review, the risk management plan that's prepared by management, and in an upcoming module I'm going to talk lots. The whole module is about board liability and risk management. The next thing is regular board development activities, 3 or 4 times a year. Thank you. Big shout out to all of you who are embedding the Great Boards modules into your board development plan. I think it's a great practice. You know, you bought the course, you may as well use it, and putting it into individual board member meetings is an awesome way of doing that. Make sure you give all of your board members individual access to the training. Bring guest speakers in, invite your insurance people in, invite your auditor in. Do things that are of interest to the board that help the board get better and more thorough at its work. And you should be doing an annual review and updating of your strategic plan. You usually do your strategic planning in a 3-year cycle. Some boards do it in a 5-year cycle. That's a little optimistic. It's hard to anticipate context in 5-year cycles. But you really do need to meet on an annual basis. And this is usually a meeting of stakeholders, the board, senior management, sometimes some participants or users of the organization. Sometimes some of your major funders or donors attend that meeting as well. We update our annual plan so that it stays current through its 3-year term. So the next list now is the 2 to 3 year term. And again, don't worry about whether my list is identical to your list. Just fix this to make it work for your organization. Should be doing at least every 3 years the governance policy review and revisions if any are required. By the way, guard against the sense that, oh, they're pretty good and we probably don't need to change them. Go in there. It's like proofreading your own work. Go in there saying, I know there are mistakes in here. I know this is good, but it could be a little bit better, and get into the habit of being self-critical. So when you do this, don't look for rubber stamping and confirming that it's good. Go into it with the attitude if it can be better, and we're going to find the stuff that's not clear, that's not complete, stuff that's missing, stuff that's not well worded, etc. 3-year strategic planning that we've talked about. There's a module on strategic planning coming up. The review and adjustment of standing and ad hoc committees, very important. Make your committees have a sunset clause if they're ad hoc. Give them a task, tell them when they need to deliver on that, and if they have a need to continue on, allow them to do that, but make them die at some point in time, at least by way of a calendar date. That forces you then to say, this committee has has to die on September the 30th, we have to either reestablish it or we just have to let it go. There are lots of committees that are part of boards that haven't met for months or years, and they're deadwood, and there's no point to continue to have them on the books. So once every 2 or 3 years, make sure that you review your committees and do we need them. By the way, I'm not a big believer in a ton of standing committees. Finance committee is probably the single most important standing committee. Sometimes executive committee if your organization is large, geographically diverse, and if meeting as a whole board is difficult, then having a standing committee that is your executive is not a bad idea. But there are very few other standing committees. And by the way, look very carefully at your committee structure and make sure you do not have operating committees with names like facility committee and personnel committee and client referral and intake and discharge committee. And I'm going to run amok of some of my clients who have these committees, but those are operational committees. The board has no business in committees of that sort. And by the way, I know of one jurisdiction, one entire province that requires board members to sit on the client as an organizations serve people with disabilities. The funder, the provincial funder, requires that board members sit on the intake and discharge committee. Completely inappropriate. And just as I say that, one of my favorite phrases, drives some of my government colleagues nuts, is that governments don't know anything about governance. And so the problem is this well intended from the government bureaucrat perspective. It's the standard and the expectation of the contract, so the funded organizations have no choice. But the problem with it is it's operational. And so the government people who designed that particular contractual obligation don't get the idea of governance, and the board members shouldn't have any even knowledge of the names of the individuals that are served. It's a clear breach of confidentiality. And if you were an individual who was served or a family was served, you really wouldn't want the board of directors to know that. Service people who are the paid staff, absolutely. So we need to understand that our committee structure is really needs to be driven by governance activities rather than operational activities. The next one is that employees and participant satisfaction surveys that need to be done once every 2 to 3 years is usually sufficient for that. The larger the organization, the more often you will do them, and sometimes accrediting bodies, CARF, for example, a major accreditor in both the United States and Canada, has a requirement that the annual satisfaction surveys are absolutely a part of the accrediting process. So funders sometimes have something to say about how often you will do that, and you'll move it to the other list. Continuing on with our list, receiving and reviewing accreditation certification results. So whatever that process is in your organization, some of you have none of it. Some of you have once every 2 or 3 years usually for accreditation site survey. Those results go back to the board. A board self-appraisal at least once every 2 years, if not annually. And the executive director compensation review with comparative analysis across the sector. We're getting much better data from what other organizations are paying, and almost in every jurisdiction that I know of now, somebody is taking the responsibility for gathering up information that says if you're an executive director of an organization between $2 million and $12 million with this many staff, et cetera, that this should be the range that you should be paid. So that's what we mean by comparative analysis. Usually you have to pay a fair chunk of change for those reports because they cost a fair amount of time and money to put together. So pool your resources with another nonprofit who also has to do this. Buy one copy of the report and share it, and I didn't tell you to do that. So make sure that you're doing comparative analysis to make sure you're paying market value for your ED. Don't convince yourself that you shouldn't, because when you have to hire to replace that person, you do not want the shock of saying, oh, well, you know, Bob got paid $63,000 a year and he was happy. We should be able to pay somebody $63,000 a year, or maybe 65. And the problem with that is that if that position is worth $75,000 or $85,000 or $100,000, guess what? You won't be able to attract anybody at $63,000, even if Bob was fine with being paid $63,000. So keeping this in mind when you're doing your reviews is absolutely critical. Underpaying your executive director is not a good idea. And by the way, another reason it's not a good idea is they can walk into a job that pays $20,000 or $30,000 more. They have experience, they'll get the job, and we are very short for executive directors in this sector right across North America right now. And we have a huge number of people retiring. Close to 100,000 executive directors across Canada and the US are leaving every single year. This is a huge number of people, and we don't have enough talent behind to fill all those vacancies. So don't believe for a minute that you should be underpaying your executive director just because you can get away with it. Let's look at the 5-year list now. Bylaw review and revisions. We talked about that. Making sure mission, vision, values are reviewed also. And again, look at a critical eye. Don't just say, oh, I think that mission's still pretty good. I think it still applies. Look at it and say, is this really our why? Simon Sinek talks about your why. And so we want to make sure this is your why. It's a mission, not your what or your how, your why. And I'll talk about that in another module. But look at it critically and say, does this answer the right question? Has it got the right language? Has anything changed in what we are doing? And update it from that kind of critical analytical perspective. Executive director succession planning, both short and long term, and you should be doing a liability insurance review and probably a benefit package review. Although the benefit package will be done by management, it might come back to the board with the results of that, just to say we did this and we're on the top of our game, we've got great benefits. By comparison, we're getting great value for money. It's often a budget question, so it does pertain to governance work because the board has to approve that budget. All right, in your turn now at the end of this module, you have some assignment, and it's a pretty long assignment. I think there's 6 points on this list. So walk yourself through that and remind yourself that watching the videos is great, but how you apply these new skills and new ideas is what will really make your board soar and turn it into a great board. Thanks for your attention. It's the end of this module, and I will look forward to seeing you in the next module. All the best.